The iPhone vibrating against the grand mahogany dining table sounded less like a notification and more like a ticking time bomb. It was Thanksgiving dinner at the Miller estate, a scene so perfectly curated it could have been a centerfold for better homes and gardens. The crystal stemware caught the light of the chandelier, the roast turkey was carved with surgical precision, and the air was thick with the scent of sage stuffing and unspoken resentment. Jason sat to Brooke's right, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. He stared at the screen of his phone where a number without a name, just a string of digits, flashed insistently. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a bee. "Aren't you going to get that, darling?" Brooke asked. Her voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a dagger. She speared a roasted Brussels sprout with deliberate slowness. "It seems urgent. That's the third time they've called since we sat down." "It is nothing," Jason said, his voice a little too high, a little too tight. He reached out to flip the phone over, face down, just a spam caller, probably trying to sell me an extended car warranty. On Thanksgiving. These telemarketers really have no boundaries, Brooke mused. Her eyes, cool and sharp, didn't leave his face. Before Jason's hand could cover the screen, Brooke's manicured fingers moved faster. With the elegance of a viper striking, she tapped the green icon, then the speaker button. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to hold its breath. "Jason, baby?" The voice that floated out of the tiny speakers was young, breathy, and soaked in a cloying sweetness that made Brooke's teeth ache. "Why aren't you picking up? You promised you'd slip away early. I'm lonely." The color drained from Jason's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Across the table, his mother, Brenda, dropped her silverware. The clatter of sterling silver against fine china sounded like a gunshot. "Jason," the voice continued, oblivious to the carnage it was causing. "Are you coming over tonight? I have a surprise. A big surprise." Jason lunged for the phone. "It is a prank. It is a wrong number." Brooke snatched the phone away, holding it just out of his reach. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at the device as if it were a petri dish containing a fascinating new bacteria. "Hello," Brooke said into the speaker. Her tone was polite, conversational, the same tone she used when ordering a latte. "This is Jason's wife. To whom am I speaking?" A gasp echoed from the other end of the line. A beat of silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Brooke expected the girl to hang up. Most would, but the voice that returned was suddenly sharper, spiked with the arrogance of youth and the false confidence of being the chosen one. "Oh, it's you," the girl said. "I'm Jessica, Jason's executive assistant, and his future." "Jessica," Brooke repeated, testing the name. "The one who can't figure out how to format a PDF, that Jessica." "I'm the Jessica who is carrying his son," the voice snapped back. "Venomous now. Jason told me he was leaving you. He said you were cold, controlling, and boring. He said he wanted a real family. So you might as well let him go tonight because he's coming home to us." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jason looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. He turned his desperate, sweating face toward his parents. "Mom, Dad, she's lying. She's mentally unstable, a stalker." Brenda Miller, a woman whose pearls were tighter than her morals, finally found her voice. She didn't look at her lying son. She glared at Brooke. "Brooke, hang up that phone immediately," Brenda hissed, her face flushing a blotchy red. "Have you no dignity, airing dirty laundry at the dinner table?" "It's unseemly. Jason says it's a misunderstanding, so it is a misunderstanding. Stop making a scene." Brooke looked at her mother-in-law. For 8 years, she had played the role of the dutiful wife. She had bitten her tongue when Brenda criticized her cooking, her career, and her inability to produce a grandchild on command. She had poured her own inheritance into Jason's startup, Nexus Tech, working 80-hour weeks in the shadows to fix his sloppy code and disastrous business decisions, all to let him play the big, important CEO. And this was the thanks she got: a scene. Brooke let out a low, dry laugh. It was a terrifying sound. "Brenda, your son's mistress is on speakerphone announcing a pregnancy during the turkey course. I didn't make the scene. I just turned up the volume." Most women would scream, flip the table, or throw the Chardonnay. How dreadfully pedestrian. Brooke understood that the most lethal weapon in a marriage is not rage, but distinct clarity. She didn't create the chaos. She simply stopped curating Jason's lies for him. By answering that phone, she forced the mistress to deliver the bad news herself. Why dirty your own hands when the other woman is so eager to dig the grave? She stood up. She was wearing a simple black dress and red-soled stilettos. Shoes she had bought with her own money. Unlike the sports car Jason had bought Jessica with company funds last month. "Jason," Brooke said, looking down at the man shaking in his chair. "You told her I was boring, that I was controlling." "Brooke, please," Jason whispered, reaching for her hand. "Let's talk about this in private, not here, not now. There is nothing to talk about." Brooke dropped the phone onto the hardwood floor. Jason scrambled to pick it up, but he was too slow. Brooke raised her foot with a precise, violent motion. She brought her heel down directly onto the screen. Crack, the glass shattered. The metal frame bent. The breathy voice of Jessica was silenced mid-sentence. Jason stared at the wreckage of his latest iPhone, the one containing all his texts, his photos, and his secrets, as if she had just stomped on his heart. You crazy," he stammered, looking up at her with genuine fear. "I'm leaving," Brooke announced calmly, picking up her clutch. She didn't look back at the stunned in-laws or the broken man on the floor. "Enjoy the turkey. I hear it's dry this year." "You can't just leave," Brenda shrieked, standing up. "This is my house. You are Jason's wife. You have a duty to stand by him." Brooke paused at the archway of the dining room. She turned, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. "Actually, Brenda," Brooke said, her voice cool and detached, "I don't think I do. And considering Nexus Tech wouldn't exist without my code, I suggest you tell your son to call a lawyer. He's going to need a very expensive one." She walked out the front door into the crisp November air, leaving the wreckage of her marriage behind her like a pile of dirty dishes. The wind felt cold on her face, but for the first time in years, she could breathe. But Jason, in his arrogance, thought this was just a marital spat. He thought he could wheedle his way back in. He had no idea that Brooke wasn't just walking away. She was going to war. Jason didn't let her leave quietly. He followed her back to the city, his sleek black SUV tailing her car aggressively, flashing its high beams like a petulant child demanding attention. By the time Brooke unlocked the door to their sprawling penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Jason was right behind her, forcing his way in before the heavy oak door could click shut. He was out of breath, his tie loosened, his face a mask of indignation rather than remorse. "You have some nerve, Brooke," Jason shouted, his voice echoing off the minimalist white walls. "Humiliating me in front of my parents, destroying my phone. You're unhinged." Brooke didn't flinch. She walked calmly to the kitchen island, placed her clutch on the marble countertop, and poured herself a glass of sparkling water. She took a sip, the bubbles dancing on her tongue, before turning to face him. "I'm unhinged?" she asked, her eyebrows raising slightly. "Jason, you're the one who got your 24-year-old assistant pregnant. and let her call you daddy on speakerphone during Thanksgiving. I think the definition of unhinged is currently sitting in your court. It's not what you think. Jason began to pace, waving his hands. This was his favorite move, the pivot, Jessica. She's confused, she's obsessed with me. I was trying to let her down gently, and she spiraled. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to worry you. I was trying to protect you. Protect me. Brooke set the glass down. The sound was soft but heavy. You've been transferring funds from our joint account to a separate LLC for 6 months. You bought a condo in the Marina District 3 weeks ago. Was that to protect me too? Or was that the love nest for you and your assistant? Jason stopped pacing. His jaw worked, grinding silently. He realized the denial strategy wasn't working, so he switched gears instantly. The charm vanished, replaced by a sneer. Fine, you want the truth? Yes, I slept with her, and you know whose fault that is, yours. He took a step toward her, pointing an accusing finger. Look at you, Brooke. You're cold, you're robotic, you treat our marriage like a business merger. Jessica makes me feel like a man. She looks up to me. She doesn't correct my grammar or rewrite my code. She appreciates me. She appreciates your credit card, Brooke corrected. And she appreciates the company I built for you. You built. Jason let out a harsh, barking laugh. Don't flatter yourself. You wrote some code 5 years ago. I'm the CEO. I'm the face of Nexus Tech. I'm the one on the magazine covers. I'm the one bringing in the investors. You're just the housewife who got lucky. He puffed out his chest, adjusting his suit jacket, reclaiming his delusional sense of power. And here's the reality check, Brooke. If you try to divorce me, I will destroy you. I own 51% of the voting shares. I control the board. You'll walk away with nothing but your shoe collection. I'll make sure the legal fees bleed you dry before we even get to mediation. He smiled then, a cruel, confident smile. He truly believed he held all the cards. He thought Brooke was just a scorned woman with no leverage. Brooke looked at him with a mixture of pity and boredom. It was tragic. Really, how little he understood about the empire he claimed to rule. Jason, she said softly, do you remember the licensing agreement we signed when Nexus was founded? The one you didn't read because you were too busy picking out the Herman Miller chairs for your office. Jason frowned. What are you talking about? The Nexus algorithm. The core code that powers the entire platform isn't company property, Brooke explained, enunciating every word. It's my intellectual property. It's categorized as separate property under state law because I patented it 3 years before we got married. Nexus Tech just has a license to use it. She took a step closer to him, her eyes locking onto his. A revocable license at my sole discretion. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason blinked, his brain struggling to process the information. You can't revoke it. That would kill the company. Exactly, Brooke said. Without my code, Nexus Tech is just a fancy website with a nice logo. You own 51% of a shell, Jason. And tomorrow morning, I'm pulling the plug. You wouldn't dare, he whispered, the blood draining from his face again. Try me, Brooke gestured toward the door. Now, get out. What? Get out of my apartment, she repeated. This penthouse was bought with my inheritance. My name is on the deed. Yours isn't. You are trespassing. Brooke, baby, wait. Jason's aggression dissolved into panic. He realized he had overplayed his hand. He tried to reach for her again, his eyes wide and pleading. We can talk about this. I was angry. I didn't mean it. We're a team, remember? Brooke walked past him and opened the front door wide. The hallway lights buzzed, fluorescent and cold. We were never a team, Jason. I was the engine, and you were the hood ornament, and I'm trading in. Jason is a classic case of a man confusing the packaging with the product. He thought he was the CEO because he wore the suit and sat in the ergonomic chair. In reality, he was merely the interface for Brooke's operating system. Arrogance is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs you to the reality that you are replaceable, right up until the moment the locks are changed. Never insult the architect when you are living in her house. Brooke, out or I call security. And trust me, having the police drag you out of here won't look good for the stock price. Defeated, shocked, and suddenly very small, Jason stumbled out into the hallway. He looked like a man waking up from a dream, only to find himself falling off a cliff. Brooke slammed the door shut. She locked the deadbolt. Click. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse against the door. Instead, she walked back to the kitchen, picked up her phone, her personal phone, and dialed a number she had saved for emergencies. "Emily," she said when the line connected. "Brooke, it's late. Is everything okay?" Her best friend's voice was groggy but alert. Brooke took a sip of her water, staring out at the city lights. "I'm fine," Brooke said, "but Jason won't be. Execute Order 66. Burn it all down." The next morning, the financial district woke up to a massacre, but there wasn't a drop of blood on the pavement. While Jason was frantically calling his board members from a hotel room, trying to spin a narrative about his unstable wife, Brooke, sat in a private booth at an upscale coffee shop downtown. Across from her sat Emily, looking fierce in a sharp navy blazer, surrounded by a fortress of legal documents. "You realize this is nuclear," Emily said, tapping a manicured fingernail on the cease and desist order. "Once we file this, the market cap of Nexus Tech is going to freefall. Investors will panic, the media will feast." "Good," Brooke replied, taking a delicate bite of her almond croissant. She looked refreshed, having slept a solid 8 hours for the first time in months. Jason wanted the spotlight. "I am just making sure it is bright enough." And the restraining order against accessing company accounts, filed along with the evidence of him siphoning funds to pay for Jessica's consulting fees. Brooke pushed a folder across the table. He categorized her condo down payment as research and development. "Can you believe the audacity?" Emily snorted. "Audacity is the only thing that man has in abundance." "All right, let's do this." At 9 a.m. sharp, the press release went live. Nexus founder Brooke Miller terminates intellectual property license with Nexus Tech, effective immediately due to breach of contract and mismanagement. It was a sentence that cost millions of dollars per word. By 9:15 a.m., the stock price of Nexus Tech had dropped by 12%. By 9:30 a.m., trading was halted due to volatility. At 10 a.m., Jason stormed into the Nexus headquarters. He looked disheveled, wearing the same suit from the night before. He marched past the terrified receptionist, barging into the main conference room where an emergency board meeting was already underway without him. "What is going on here?" Jason roared, slamming his hands on the glass table. "Why are the servers down? Why is my keycard not working for the executive elevator?" The board members, a group of gray-haired men who usually treated Jason like a golden boy, looked at him with icy disdain. Sitting at the head of the table wasn't the chairman, but Brooke. She didn't look up from her iPad. "You're late, Jason, and you're trespassing." "Trespassing? I'm the CEO!" Jason shouted, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at Brooke. You did this! You locked me out of the system! You sabotaged the product!" "I didn't sabotage anything," Brooke said calmly, finally meeting his gaze. "I simply took back what was mine. The Nexus algorithm is my property. You were using it under a license agreement that required ethical conduct and financial transparency. You violated both when you started using investor money to fund your mistress's lifestyle. That's a lie. Jason screamed. Is it? Brooke tapped the screen of her iPad. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. A spreadsheet appeared. It detailed months of transactions, luxury car leases, jewelry store purchases, high-end apartment rentals, all paid for by Nexus Tech, all authorized by Jason Miller. The room gasped. One board member, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had been Jason's biggest supporter, stood up slowly. Jason, Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling with rage. Is this true? Did you use the Series B funding to buy a Cartier bracelet? It was a business expense, Jason stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. Client relations, you don't understand how these things work. We understand perfectly, Brooke interjected. You treated this public company like your personal piggy bank. And now, the bank is closed. Jason looked around the room, searching for an ally. He saw only disgust. He turned back to Brooke, his eyes narrowing into slits. You can't do this. I have 51% of the shares. I can fire you. I can fire... Actually, Emily spoke up from the corner of the room, stepping out of the shadows. Under the bylaws of Nexus Tech, a CEO can be removed for gross negligence and criminal misconduct by a simple majority of the remaining board members, regardless of share ownership. And guess what we just voted on before you walked in? Jason froze. He looked at Mr. Henderson. He looked at the other board members. They all averted their eyes. You fired me, Jason whispered. We didn't just fire you, Jason, Brooke said, standing up. She smoothed her skirt, looking every inch the queen reclaiming her throne. We're suing you for embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The SEC has already been notified. Jason staggered back as if physically struck. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. No job, no money, no company. And a federal investigation looming over his head. Suddenly, the doors to the conference room burst open again. But it wasn't security, it was the press. Dozens of cameras and microphones flooded the hallway outside the glass walls, capturing the exact moment of Jason's downfall. Brooke had tipped them off. She walked towards the door, ignoring Jason completely. As she stepped out into the blinding flash of cameras, a reporter thrust a microphone into her face. Mrs. Miller, is it true you're evicting your husband from the company? Is this a hostile takeover? Brooke stopped. She looked directly into the camera lens, her expression somber but strong. It's not a takeover, she said, her voice steady. It's a correction. Nexus Tech was built on innovation and integrity. Unfortunately, under the previous leadership, we lost our way. Today, we are simply taking out the trash. Behind her, through the glass walls, the world watched as security guards grabbed Jason by the arms and began to drag him out of the office he thought he owned. He was screaming, kicking, looking wild and pathetic, but nobody was listening anymore. The king was dead. Long live the queen. The weeks following Jason's public ousting were a blur of legal depositions and forensic accounting. While Brooke worked tirelessly to stabilize the company, Jason's life unraveled with spectacular speed. Stripped of his corporate credit cards and frozen out of their joint accounts, Jason found himself in a position he hadn't known since college. Broke, he crashed at his parents' house in the suburbs, a humiliation that burned him daily. Brenda, his mother, spent her days leaving frantic, weeping voicemails on Brooke's blocked number, oscillating between begging for mercy and screaming curses. But the real drama was unfolding elsewhere. Jessica, the mistress who had envisioned a life of luxury yachts and red carpets, was discovering that a sugar daddy without sugar is just a broke, angry man. It started with small cracks. The lease on the condo Jason had rented for her under the company name was terminated. The leased sports car was repossessed in the middle of a yoga class. Jessica's credit cards began to decline. Desperate, she tracked Jason down to a dive bar on the outskirts of town where he had taken to drinking away his sorrows at 2 p.m. "You promised me," Jessica shrieked, slamming her purse onto the sticky table. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore. Her makeup was smudged and her desperation was palpable. "You said you owned the company. You said Brooke was nothing. Now my landlord is evicting me, and I have bills to pay." Jason looked up from his cheap whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. The charm that had once seduced investors and women alike was gone, replaced by a bitter, hollow cruelty. "Shut up," he slurred. "You think you have problems. I'm facing 10 years in federal prison because of you. If you hadn't called me on Thanksgiving, if you hadn't been so greedy." "Me," Jessica gasped. "You're the one who stole the money. You're the liar. And what about our baby? Are you going to let your child starve?" Jason laughed, a low, ugly sound. "Baby? There is no baby, is there, Jessica? You haven't been to a doctor once. You just wanted a ring." Jessica's face went pale. It was the one card she had left, and he had just called her bluff. But she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "If you don't give me $50,000 by tomorrow," she hissed, leaning in close, "I'm going to the district attorney. I have voicemails, Jason. I have recordings of you bragging about how you cooked the books to hide the money. I'll bury you." Jason stared at her. The alcohol-fueled rage simmering in his gut suddenly boiled over. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "You want money?" he roared. "I'll give you something." He lunged at her. It wasn't a calculated attack. It was a clumsy, drunken flailing of limbs. But he was big, and she was small. He shoved her. Hard, Jessica stumbled back, her high heels catching on the uneven floorboards. She fell, crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. She hit the floor hard, screaming as shattered glass sliced into her arm. Chaos erupted, patrons shouted. The bartender vaulted over the counter. Someone called 911. Jason stood there, panting, looking down at the woman he claimed to love, now bleeding on the floor of a dive bar. He didn't move to help her, he just stared, his mind completely blank. By the time the police arrived, Jessica was being loaded into an ambulance, wailing about lawsuits and assault. Jason was handcuffed, shoved into the back of a squad car for the second time in a month. This time, there were no corporate lawyers to bail him out. Meanwhile, at Nexus Tech, Brooke was in the middle of a strategic planning meeting when her phone buzzed. It was Emily, turn on the news. Emily's text read, Brooke signaled for a pause in the meeting and clicked the remote for the wall-mounted television. Breaking news: disgraced CEO Jason Miller arrested for assault. The screen showed footage of Jason, looking disheveled and handcuffed, being led into the police station. The ticker at the bottom scrolled, "Mistress hospitalized, allegations of blackmail and violence." The boardroom was silent. The executives looked at Brooke, unsure of how to react. Brooke stared at the screen. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel joy. She felt a profound sense of closure. The man on the screen, that angry, violent, pathetic stranger, was not the man she had married. That man had died a long time ago, consumed by his own ego. "Turn it off," Brooke said quietly. The screen went black. "We have work to do," she addressed her team, her voice firm and focused. "Mr. Miller's personal legal issues are unfortunate, but they have no bearing on the future of Nexus Tech. Let's get back to the quarterly projections. But just as she picked up her laser pointer, her phone rang again. It wasn't Emily this time. It was a number she didn't recognize. But the area code was local, she answered. "This is Brooke." "Mrs. Miller." "This is Detective Rodriguez from the 4th Precinct," a gruff voice said. "Your ex-husband is asking for you. He says he needs to speak to you. He says it's a matter of life and death." Brooke walked to the window, looking out at the city she now owned a piece of. "Detective," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Mr. Miller has a mother, call her. I'm afraid I'm in a meeting." "Ma'am." "He's pretty insistent. He says he has information about hidden accounts. He says he'll only tell you." Brooke paused. A hidden account. Was he bluffing? Or was this one last trap? "Tell him I'll come," Brooke said finally. "But tell him to bring his lawyer, because I'm certainly bringing mine." She hung up and looked at Emily, who had just walked in the door. "One last visit," Brooke said, grabbing her coat. "Let's go see what the rat has to say before the ship finally sinks." As she walked out of the building, the wind caught her hair. She wasn't walking into the lion's den this time. She was the lion. The police station smelled of stale coffee and despair. It was a far cry from the polished marble and climate, controlled air of the Nexus Tech offices, a stark reminder of how far Jason had fallen. Brooke sat on a hard metal chair in the interrogation room, her posture impeccable. Emily sat beside her, briefcase open, ready for war. When the door opened and Jason was led in, Brooke almost didn't recognize him. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He hadn't shaved in days, and his once charming smile was gone, replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. He sat down, the chains of his handcuffs clinking against the table. He looked at Brooke, then at Emily, then down at his hands. "You look good," he muttered, his voice raspy. "You don't," Brooke replied simply. "You said you had information about hidden accounts." "We're listening." Jason let out a shaky breath. I lied. There are no other accounts. You found everything. You and your damn forensic accountants." Emily started to close her briefcase. "Then, we're done here. Let's go, Brooke." "Wait." Jason lunged forward, the chains pulling taut. "Please, Brooke, don't go. I needed to see you. I needed to explain." Brooke signaled Emily to wait. She looked at Jason, her expression unreadable. "Explain what?" "Jason, how you stole from our company. How you assaulted your pregnant mistress." "She wasn't pregnant," Jason shouted, then lowered his voice, looking around fearfully. "She lied, Brooke. She admitted it. She was never pregnant. It was all a scam to get me to leave you. I was the victim here." Brooke stared at him. Even now, in a jumpsuit and shackles, he was still trying to spin the narrative. He was still the hero of his own delusional story. "You weren't a victim, Jason," Brooke said softly. "You were a volunteer. You chose to cheat. You chose to steal. You chose to believe a lie because it flattered your ego. Jessica didn't ruin your life. You did." "I know." Jason put his head in his hands. "I know I messed up. I was stupid. I was weak. But Brooke, look at us. We built something amazing together. I can fix this. I can testify against Jessica. I can say she blackmailed me. We can blame it all on her. Just help me with the bail. Help me get it. I'll sign over my shares. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't let me rot in here." He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. It was a performance she had seen 1,000 times before. The apology, the promise to change. The plea for one more chance. But this time, the audience had left the building. Brooke stood. She walked to the two-way mirror, looking at her own reflection. She saw a woman who had spent 10 years making herself smaller, so a man could feel big. She saw a woman who was finally done shrinking. She turned back to Jason. "I already have your shares, Jason. The board voted this morning to reclaim them as restitution for the embezzlement. You have nothing left to offer me, Brooke. And as for bail," she continued, "I used the last of our joint liquid assets to set up a trust fund." Jason's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. "A trust fund? For who? For us?" "No," Brooke said, picking up her bag. "For the victims of domestic violence, in Jessica's name. This isn't just revenge. It is poetry written in wire transfers. To take the last of your cheating husband's assets and donate them to a charity named after his mistress. It is elegantly cruel. Brooke didn't just leave him in a jail cell. She used his own wallet to fund the moral high ground he never stood on. It's the kind of burn that doesn't just hurt. It leaves a scar on the soul." Jason's jaw dropped. The insult was so precise, so poetic, it left him speechless. "Goodbye, Jason," Brooke said. She walked to the door, Emily right behind her. "You can't leave me here," Jason screamed, standing up, rattling his chains. "I'm your husband. I made you. You're nothing without me, Brooke, Brooke." The heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. Outside in the hallway, Brenda Miller was waiting. She looked frail, leaning heavily on a cane. When she saw Brooke, she hobbled forward, grabbing Brooke's arm with a surprisingly strong grip. You heartless witch," Brenda spat. "You did this. You planned this. You wanted to destroy my boy." Brooke gently but firmly removed Brenda's hand from her arm. "Your boy destroyed himself, Brenda." And frankly, Brooke leaned in close, her voice a whisper. "You helped him. You taught him that he could do no wrong. You taught him that women were disposable. You created a monster, and now you're surprised he bit you," Brenda gasped, clutching her chest. "How dare you? I dare because I won," Brooke said. "The house is gone, Brenda. The bank foreclosed on it yesterday to cover Jason's debts. I suggest you find a nice retirement home. I hear the state. Run ones have openings." Brooke didn't wait for a response. She walked out of the police station, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum floor. Emily walked beside her, silent for a moment. Then she smiled. "You know," Emily said, "that was incredibly cold." Brooke put on her sunglasses, shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. "It wasn't cold, Emily," she said. "It was justice." They walked to the curb where Brooke's car was waiting. Not a family SUV, but a sleek, vintage convertible she had bought for herself that morning. "Where to now?" Emily asked. Brooke opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. She looked at the horizon, open and wide. "To the office," Brooke said, starting the engine. The roar of the motor drowned out the memory of Jason's screams. "We have a company to rebuild." She drove away, leaving the police station, the Millers, and her past in the rearview mirror. Objects in the mirror were smaller than they appeared, and getting smaller by the second one. Year later, the grand ballroom of the city's most historic hotel was unrecognizable. It had been transformed into a shimmering garden of fiber, optic lights, and white orchids. The champagne flowed like water, and the air buzzed with the kind of electric energy that only accompanies a massive success story. Brooke stood on the balcony overlooking the crowd, a glass of vintage sparkling Rosé in her hand. She wasn't wearing black tonight. She was draped in a floor-length gown of shimmering gold, a dress that screamed victory in every stitch. "You know," a familiar voice drawled from behind her. "I think this party costs more than Jason's bail bond." Brooke turned to see Emily, looking radiant in emerald green. They clinked glasses, worth every penny. Brooke smiled. The smile reached her eyes now. The shadows that had haunted her face a year ago were gone, replaced by a radiant, unshakable glow. Tonite was the relaunch of the company. Nexus Tech was dead, buried under the weight of its former CEO's scandals. In its place stood Nova Innovations. New name, new branding, and a CEO who actually knew how to code. Speaking of the devil, Emily leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I got a call from the state penitentiary today. Brooke took a sip of her drink, unbothered. Oh, how is inmate 0943 doing? Apparently not well. He's working in the laundry detail, complaining about the thread count of the sheets. He wanted to know if you received his letter. I did, Brooke said calmly. It made excellent kindling for my fireplace. Jason was serving a 3-year sentence. It wasn't a life term, but for a narcissist like him, being forgotten was a fate worse than death. As for his parents, Brenda and Frank, the grapevine, which Emily tended to like a master gardener, reported they were living in a 2-bedroom rental in a questionable part of town, complaining to anyone who would listen about their ungrateful daughter-in-law. And Jessica, Brooke asked, merely out of curiosity. Moved back to the Midwest, Emily shrugged. Working at a diner, I hear, looking for the next sucker. But honestly, who cares? Look at this room, Brooke. They are all here for you. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage. A hush fell over the hundreds of employees, investors, and media personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. Please welcome the CEO and founder of Nova Innovations, Brooke Miller. Brooke walked onto the stage. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. She walked with the rhythm of a woman who owns the ground beneath her feet. She approached the microphone. The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite applause. It was raucous, genuine admiration. She waited for it to die down. Thank you, she began, her voice clear and strong. A year ago, I was told that this company was nothing without a certain man at the helm. I was told that a woman couldn't handle the pressure. I was told that I should stay in the kitchen. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Well, Brooke continued, a playful smirk touching her lips, I decided to renovate the kitchen and the living room and the boardroom. More cheers. We faced a storm, she said, her tone turning serious. But storms don't just destroy, they clear the path, they wash away the rot. Nova isn't just a tech company. It's a testament to the fact that you can lose everything. Your marriage, your home, your sense of security, and still come out the other side stronger. We rebuilt this algorithm from the ground up, not with lies and embezzlement, but with integrity and hard work. She raised her glass toward the crowd. To new beginning, and to never ever letting anyone else hold the pen when writing your life story. To Brooke, the crowd roared back. As she walked off stage, her heart felt full, not because of the applause, but because she knew she had meant every word. Later that evening, as the DJ started playing a slow, soulful jazz number, a man approached her. He was tall, distinguished, with silver at his temples and a bespoke tuxedo. He was a venture capitalist she had met earlier, a man with kind eyes and a portfolio worth billions. Mrs. Miller, he said, extending a hand. Or is it Miss Miller now? May I have this dance? Brooke looked at his hand. A year ago, she would have been desperate for this kind of validation. She would have seen a man like this as a savior, a replacement, a way to prove she was still desirable. But tonight, she smiled, but she didn't take his hand immediately. It's Miss Miller, she corrected gently. And I'd love to dance, but just so we're clear. She looked him in the eye, her chin held high. I'm not looking for a partner. I'm not looking for a savior. I'm just looking for a dance." The man blinked, surprised by her directness, and then he smiled, a genuine, respectful smile. "I wouldn't dream of being anything else," he said. Brooke took his hand and stepped onto the dance floor. She moved with grace, spinning under the lights, her gold dress catching the fire of the moment. She thought about Jason rotting in his cell. She thought about Brenda, bitter in her small apartment. She thought about the woman she used to be, scared, silent, waiting for permission to exist. That woman was gone. Brooke spun again, laughing as the music swelled. She didn't need a man to complete her. She didn't need a marriage to define her. She had her friends. She had her empire. And most importantly, she had herself. The algorithm of revenge was complete. The output, absolute, unadulterated freedom. Let's elevate this for a moment. Jason's downfall wasn't the affair. It was his failure to read the fine print of his own life. He treated Brooke like an accessory, something decorative to be kept in the background, completely forgetting that she was the structural integrity of his entire world. He called her boring because she provided stability, not realizing that stability is the only reason he was able to play big shot in the first place. Brooke didn't ruin Jason's life. She simply revoked his license to use hers. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been the silent partner in someone else's success, only to be treated like an employee? When did you finally decide to stop working for free and send them the invoice? Tell me about your intellectual property moment in the comments. I'll be reading them, Madam Readout.